On 3, growth functions. So we will learn a new concept called growth functions to give us the idea how fast the function can grow. The function usually, when we measure the running time efficiency, we will get some function. But sometimes the function could be very complicated. Yeah. So for a complicated function, we want to simplify it. So we define this growth function. This growth function only take the most important part of that function. Yeah. So we will see. So this concept is very convenient to give us idea how fast an algorithm is. Yeah. All right. So let's look at the formula between running time and the number of basic operations, because we want to replace running time function. Yeah, for running time, there is a function for it. Yeah, but because we want to avoid using running time function directly, so we want to replace it by another function, number of basic operations. But if we do that replacement, how to justify that replacement? So let's look at this issue first. We use some simple notations. Function of the running time T of n. So this is the function we want to measure directly, but it has some drawbacks. Yeah, so we talked about that in the previous video. It has some drawbacks, so we want to avoid using it directly. All right, so then a better way to do it, using another related function. So function of the number of basic operations, C of n. Counting numbers, count the number of basic operations, C of n. Yeah. If we use C of n to replace T of n, how do you justify it? Right? Yeah, so now we want to understand that. Yeah. So we can do that. Well, there is some good reason we can do that. Yeah. All right. We need to make this assumption. Execution time of a basic operation, C sub op. Okay, execution time. For a different machine, this number could be different. But here we just use this in our analysis. Later, after we complete the analysis, later when we do the replacement, using C of n to replace T of n, then we won't use this temporary number anymore. Yeah. All right. The formula. All right. First, let's look at the relationship between C of n and T of n. Yeah. We can do approximation. T of n and C of n. The relationship, when we multiply by the definition, each operation approximately this much time, C op, multiply total number of operations, so approximately T of n. All right. Here, relationship proportional, just by some constant. When you change this n, the constant does not change. So proportional relationship. Yeah. All right. And later, when we use a C of n function, it's more convenient than using T of n function because that's the counting number. That number we can easily get counting number of operations. Yeah. All right. Approximation approach. All right, so now we try to get better understanding for the analysis. Apply the approximation approach correctly. All right, first, let's do a key observation. Key observation. When we study an algorithm, we count the number of operations for different data sizes. Right? So we have this. Efficiency of algorithm is reflected when the input size is large. Okay? Yeah. Input size is large. In that situation, the efficiency can be seen better. Can be seen better. Why? Yeah. I will explain that. Yeah. For small inputs, it is hard to distinguish efficient algorithms from inefficient ones. For small inputs, small inputs means input size small. It is very hard to separate efficient algorithms from inefficient algorithms. Yeah. Why is that? The reason is overhead. Overhead factor. Overhead. So what's the overhead? When you do preparation, that's the overhead part. You pay to get things ready. Overhead. You need to do a lot of work to do preparation to get things going. Yeah. The overhead part. Yeah. The overhead part, when the input size is relatively small, it takes big part of the overall running time or counting number. Yeah. It takes big part of it. Then it's hard to, even for an efficient algorithm, because the overhead part is relatively big, so it's very hard to get the real working part. Because when we look at the real working part, we do not count the overhead part. But the overhead part is too big to distort the final number from the working part. So that's the reason. Then when you make the data size larger and larger, the overhead part always this much, right? Overhead, because you do preparation. When the data size is big, you still do the same amount of preparation. So when you compare the overall running time, the overhead part takes smaller and smaller portion of the total running time. Okay? In that situation, then the real working part will dominate the whole running time. So in that situation, you can get a better view of the real working part. So that's the reason. That's the reason behind these 2 points. Yeah. So in one sentence to summarize efficiency of algorithm, we look at if an algorithm is efficient or not. It's better to look at it when the input size is large. We can skip the smaller size part We can skip, yeah, because that part is distorted. That part is distorted by the overhead. So we skip it. Then, when the size is big enough, then we get a better picture of the real efficiency of this algorithm. Yeah, so that's the point for this part. Conclusion. Yeah. So when we do analysis on algorithms, we should focus on large inputs. And efficiency as small inputs is not important. Not important. yeah. Yeah. So don't worry. So for some really good algorithm, when the input size is small, it does not do well. It's okay, don't worry. So when the input size is bigger, very big, so then eventually you will see it performs really well. Yeah, so that kind of thing. All right. Then, with that understanding, the next thing we need to do, introduce special notations. Special notations that mainly provide information for the large input size. Asymptotic notations. So in our later part, we will discuss that asymptotic notations, special notations. Very simple, but it can describe a lot of things. So we want that kind of concise notations. Okay. Yeah, we will see in next a few videos. In this one, we give you the introduction to the analysis background. Yeah. All right. Next, another important point in our analysis: ignore unnecessary details. Yeah. Otherwise, if you do not ignore unnecessary detail, you will get a lot of distraction. Okay? Yeah. So we cannot grab the most important thing in the algorithm. Yeah. All right. So here in this example, yeah, some detail, so we do not care much. Yeah, we can ignore it. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So here for this running time function, we want to describe it using number of basic operations. And this COP, little COP, that's the cost of a basic operation. So the specific running time used for one basic operation, we call it cost. Time cost. So not the money cost, time cost. Time cost is equivalent to money cost, right? Yeah. Time can be converted to money, yeah, in business. Yeah. All right. So with that understanding, yeah. So here we mean that, time cost. So with that understanding, you can see we can ignore unnecessary details. We take this approach. Remove unnecessary to reveal the most important factor. We want to see things important clearly by removing those distraction information. Yeah. All right. All right. The first question, can we ignore some constant? So a lot of times some constants can be ignored. Yeah. Because their role, not very important. Yeah. Can we ignore some minor terms? Minor terms we can ignore, yeah, because minor term will be dominated by dominant terms. Yeah. In one of the previous video, I talked about dominant term. Recall when we did analysis on the sequential search, I give you that concept, a dominant term. So the minor terms are dominated by the dominant term. So we focus on the dominant term, and we can ignore the minor terms. Many minor terms we just ignore. Yeah. All right, so you can see that kind of unnecessary details. Yeah. After we ignore them, we can make the problem simplified. Yeah. All right, so look at this formula. Yeah. T of 2n over T of n ratio. So here, the expression, if you look at here, the meaning is when you double the data size, 2n, double the data size, the running time ratio, after you double the data size, approximately equal, the formula. So when you use this formula, the constant cancel out, the same as the ratio, approximately the same as the ratio, the counting number, the counting function ratio when the data size doubled. Yeah. So here in this formula, you can see the C-op is gone. The C-op constant is gone. Cancel out. Right? Yeah. So then you can see this is not that important. Right? This is not that important. So many times we can ignore it. Yeah. All right. So here, what do we get when you double the input size? How fast it changes? How fast the function changes? Yeah. Yeah. All right. So with this background, now you can see we can safely ignore unnecessary information. C-op can be ignored in this view. Yeah. All right. So then, after all these things, we can ignore the minor terms and only keep the major term, the dominant term, major term. Yeah. All right. Next, this time I will introduce the growth function. Use the growth function to measure efficiency. Okay, yeah. What is the major term? Yeah, that's the same as the dominant term. I talked about it before. Yeah. So we will look at more. Yeah, because that example, sequential search, quite some time ago, right? You may not have big impression on it. So we will have more examples to see that concept, dominant term concept. Yeah. All right. This time, let's take a look at the selection sort. We just learned at the beginning of this part, selection sort. In that one, we went through the array many, many times. Each time, we get the minimum of a subarray, reduced subarray. Every time reduce subarray by size 1 by 1. Okay, yeah. And the counting number, basic operation counting number, this many. And at that time, I ask you to think about the best case, worst case, average case, right? Yeah. Here, I give you the answer. Compare with your own thinking. Yeah. Yeah. Here, the answer. Yeah. Here. Yeah. So this is the expression. Yeah. And in this expression, look at the dominant term. This is the dominant term. N squared term, the major part, the major term, the dominant term. So that's dominant term. Okay, yeah. All right. Yeah. So the second one, minor term, we can ignore without much problem. So we can ignore. Yeah. Here, if we go back to the best case, worst case, average case, they are all equal. They are all equal. Okay? Yeah. No matter whatever input it is, you get the same number of operations. Same number of operations, no matter what the input is. So that's why these three cases match. Same thing. Yeah. All right. Now let's view the dominant term. Yeah. The first question, why you call it dominant term? Right? So why you call it dominant? How do you know the first term dominates the second term? Right? Yeah. Here, let me show you a little bit. Dominant, yeah. Here we use the limit. So we use the calculus knowledge. We take the limit this way. The first term over the second term, take the ratio. Then we look at the ratio when n goes to infinity. We calculate that limit, right? So now after you do cancellation, you simplify the ratio. You get the limit of n when n goes to infinity. That is infinity. So now the conclusion. If the ratio goes to infinity, can you say the numerator dominates the denominator? Yes, you can. Ratio goes to infinity. That's dominant. Yeah. So that's the reason behind that dominant term. Yeah. Next, now finally, we need to get to our key concept for this part, growth function. What is the growth function? Yeah. Growth function, you need to look at the dominant term first. Find the dominant term, then remove the constant. We know the constant is not that important. In this ratio, the constant is gone, right? Any constant will be canceled out. So we don't need that constant. Yeah. So you can ignore the constant. Then this function, we call the growth function. So, because we want to use a function as simple as possible to describe the running time efficiency function of the algorithm. Here, this n squared function is the simplest possible function we can use to describe the running time efficiency function. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. The constant has some small impact, but not that important. Not really important. Yeah. It has some small significance, but not very big. So we can bypass that kind of constant. Just focus on the most important part here. That's the n squared. All right, so that is the growth function background and its exact meaning. So later we will use this understanding to describe all our algorithms. All right, so let me stop here. Yeah.